People are strange. Something strange.
Is that strange?
That is strange.
Strange.
That is strange.
Wow, that is strange. This is strange.
And welcome to another episode of Strange Sauna, everybody. Today is going to be a unique episode. Obviously, no flex. He did want me to let everybody know he accepted the invitation to the Illuminati, so he will be gone. I'm kidding. He is just fine. He's not in the Illuminati. I am doing a solo episode today, kind of like I used to do, just to get an episode out. I'm going to be on vacation, so this is kind of just a unique situation. Not really talking a lot of politics today. We're not talking about the Epstein list that doesn't exist, apparently. We're going to be diving into the magic square of the sun, aka the magic square of Apollo, something that exists on the ceiling of the House of the Temple, which is the Freemasonic headquarters located in Washington, D.C. Why is there a headquarters of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry located in Washington, D.C.? You tell me. But apparently, there was a video of Tom Horn talking about this, and I found it, and I wanted to know more, okay? And I dug in, and I want you guys to know more too, okay? So first off, you guys know what to do. If you like this channel, if you like our topics and all this stuff, please support the channel, hit the like button, subscribe, share it with a friend, go over to Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, leave a rating, leave a review, go over to Spotify, do the same thing, okay? Share the show. It helps us grow, okay? Love you guys for doing that. So let's get diving into what is a magic square and why is it magic? So here is, you got here. Let me hide me, actually. You have Wikipedia's definition of the magic square. And it is, here is a 3x3 magic square. You know, you have 9 total squares, all symmetrical. But in recreational mathematics, a square array of numbers, usually positive integers, is called a magic square if the sums of the numbers in each row and each column and both main diagonals are the same. Now, so you can see here, the first row, second row, third row, all equal 15. 2 plus 7 plus 6, 15, 9 plus 5 plus 1. And then likewise, all the columns here, they all add up to 15, all of these diagonals. 6 plus 4 plus 5, 15, right? So it's magic. Why is it magic? Now, some will say it represents order, right? It's mathematical, just kind of, it's nice and tidy. It makes sense. You know, it's magic because everything aligns and it's kind of perfect. It's unity. But there's some other reason why people use this. I've heard it described as talismans. I've heard it described as somewhat the original meme. So before we had the internet, before we had memes, this is kind of one of those things where you would have some sort of using mathematics as a spell, to like a binding spell, something to capture magic or capture a will or a wish or something that you wanted to happen. And you just capture it in one of these cubes. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know. That is maybe it for an episode 2. What this magic does, I couldn't tell you. But there are definite signs that people use them in culture, and they use them in Freemasonry. And so this is the original Tom Horn video that I want you guys to watch. This is talking about the magic square located on the ceiling of the House of the Temple located in Washington, D.C.
At the Herodome across town, when they are conducting the Raising of Osiris ceremony, in the middle of that chapel room is an altar, and on that altar are all of the holy books of the great religions of the world. But above that is a binding utility. It's one of the most famous in all of antiquity. It's called the Magic Square of Apollo, or it's called the Magic 666 Square, because the panels in the stylized sunlight above the altar are exactly the same layout as a magic square, so it's a stylized magic 666 square. In antiquity, that was used to raise the spirit of Apollo from the underworld, which is central, of course, to the magic based on the great obelisk behind me, the dome behind me, and the Freemasonic and Rosicrucian ideas of the return of Apollo Osiris at the end of time to lead the New World Order. Now, to effectualize that, at the Herodome, they conduct the Raising of Osiris ceremony, where the Bibles and the other books are bound beneath the magic 666 square. This square was famous in antiquity because when adding the numbers in any direct line, horizontally, vertically, the numbers always equaled 111. But when you added all of the numbers that are in the magic 666 square, they equaled 666. So interestingly, when the Freemasons built this giant obelisk to George Washington, they maintained those influential numbers in that the obelisk is 666 inches long along each of the lines at the base, but it is 555 feet high. And if you think of that as a magic square, the number 111 remains and extends down beneath the surface of the earth to reach the totality of the number 666. So all of the numbers important to a magic Apollonian square used for raising the spirit of Apollo are incorporated into the design of the Washington Monument. Now, what most Americans also don't know is right over here,
this is nuts,
beneath the ground, is a miniature obelisk made to look just like this one, except it's only 12 feet tall, 12 being the number of the perfect government that will be incorporated when the Novus Ordo Seclorum prophecy comes to its fruition and the man of sin becomes Apollo in flesh.
Damn. Okay. So he's throwing out a bunch of stuff right there. But essentially, the magic square that he's talking about on the ceiling right here is 6 by 6. So it's 6 squares by 6 squares. You sum up each column, it's 111. And supposedly there's some more numerology and some meaning that makes it to be Apollo or representing the sun. And Tom Horn will be talking about that. But this is the number of 666. So with all of these magic squares, you can have a 3 by 3 magic square. You can have a 4 by 4, 5 by 5. This one just happens to be 6 by 6, right? And so you have to ask yourself, why is there a 6 by 6 magic square above this altar that has all of the main holy books of all the Abrahamic religions around the world? And this supposed altar is where they conduct the Raising of Osiris ritual during the inauguration of every U.S. president. And if you guys forgot about that, I'm going to play another video that kind of talks about that whole the whole ordeal, because it is essentially ties back to ancient Egypt. They did the same thing, the Raising of Osiris ritual, to have divine representation here on earth in their leader. And so we kind of took all of that, and Tom Horn does a really good job in this video, has some very good imagery on showing the obelisk and the dome. It's always connected. Around the world, you have the same kind of programmatic development here. And so you have to ask yourself, why? What is this about? And, I mean, why are they doing it? This must have some sort of ritualistic either if it's just meaning or if it actually does do some magic, who knows? Because they have it built and they're doing it for a reason, all right? So here is Tom Horn describing the, quote, Antichrist ritual, okay?
And it is directly facing, from its entry point, directly facing a large obelisk. Now, it really is one of the most openly hidden secrets that's known by all occultists and alchemists and or people who are researchers and who have studied that kind of symbolism in the past who know that that is a design that originated in ancient Egypt. A dome facing an obelisk. It comes from the myth of Osiris, you know, the story of Osiris's evil brother Set murders him and chops him into 14 pieces and throws all the pieces into the Nile. And that was just very central to Egyptian belief. And his sister wife, the queen of magical skills, Isis, she goes up and down the banks of the Nile River, collects 13 of the pieces of Osiris, can't find the 14th piece, which is his missing male organ. But she assembles his body back together, just like we had 13 continents in this country that were assembled together to form one union. And she creates an obelisk, which then becomes magically representative of his male organ, and she magically impregnates herself. Well, Egypt built an entire magical, alchemical belief system around the dome and the obelisk as representing the ever-pregnant belly of Isis and the male organ of the god Osiris. And if you go through ancient Egypt, all of their most important religious edifices, including the largest religious area that was ever built, the temple of Amun-Ra at Karnak. You go there, here's the dome temple of Isis, here's the obelisk of Osiris, and during a festival called Opet, what is it that happens? And I'm coming to a point here that's really important. The pharaoh, during the festival of Opet, would go inside this ever-pregnant belly of Isis, the dome of Isis. A raising of Osiris ceremony was conducted by the Egyptian magicians, the purpose of which was to draw forth the spirit of Osiris through the base of that obelisk, up through where it would magically emit into the belly over here of Isis. And as Pharaoh standing inside the belly of Isis, he is transmogrified. The spirit of Osiris enters him. He went in the temple as a man. He comes out. He is a god. He is Osiris in flesh, which is also known as Horus, the son of Osiris. And this way, Egypt knows they have divine representation in the leader of their country. Now, fast forward to our day.
Okay.
At the Vatican, you have a dome facing an obelisk. And by the way, that obelisk was taken from the city of Heliopolis, the ancient city of On in the Bible, where it was dedicated to the god Osiris. It is literally one of the obelisks of Osiris, was removed there, and eventually was put into the middle of St. Peter's Square there.
That's literally an obelisk of Osiris next to the Vatican, everybody. What are we doing?
But now you come to the United States. You have a dome. When the founders were building this country, they actually first called it Rome. They were designing it, if you will, after that same ancient pattern from both Egypt and the Vatican. And now, here's the point that's really important. When you talk about occultists and what they believe, and you look at Washington, the dome, and this giant obelisk known as the Washington Monument, the largest of its kind in the world, built by Freemasons in honor of George Washington. It's 6,666 inches high. It's 666 inches wide along each of the perimeters. It's based on a magic square. I mean, it's just a tremendous amount of occultism. But here's what I was told by a U.S. senator. I was doing his radio show. I won't name his name, but I can verify this. And he told me on his show, he said, yes, but were you aware that just what they did in Egypt is what they still do in Washington, D.C., that at the inauguration of every United States president, the Raising of Osiris ceremony is conducted by these modern Egyptian magicians in the House of the Temple, the Herodome, right over by the White House, the headquarters of the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, for the purpose of what? Mystically instilling the god Osiris in our U.S. presidents? I can't imagine Ronald Reagan would have been interested in that. But they're doing it because they're looking forward to the day when that God is actually going to return and enthrone himself as the leader of this country. I went to the Herodome. I set this up. My wife went with me, Nita, who could verify this. We went inside on a private tour, and I asked the 33rd degree Freemasons, I said, is that true? And they wouldn't answer that question. They answered every other question.
Imagine that.
They wouldn't say yes or no to whether they actually conduct that ancient Egyptian ceremony in Washington, D.C. at the inauguration of every U.S. president who's standing over there in the dome of Isis, the Temple Dome, the U.S. Capitol Dome. Anybody can take a tour, walk inside, and look up into her underside belly. What do you see? The apotheosis of George Washington becoming a god.
So right here, everybody, the apotheosis of George Washington. This is inside of the Capitol Dome, where Donald Trump was inaugurated this year. Most U.S. presidents are inaugurated outside. Trump, in his first term, he was inaugurated outside, right? But he had to go inside because of climate, right? And that's what they say. But he did the inauguration right underneath this drawing, where you have George Washington surrounded by old gods. And the whole mural is painted on the ceiling above. And you have 72 stars around it. 72 being the number of conspirators who helped kill his brother Osiris. So why do they have 72 stars around the apotheosis of George Washington? Why do they even have this? And, like Ronald Reagan was the last president to be sworn in underneath this while inside because of weather, right? So it's very strange. Let's keep going.
This is a very a powerful belief system, but if you couple it with the prophecies on the Great Seal, yes, Gary, 2012, they believe something happened. They believe something may culminate in 2016. They're looking forward to the fulfillment of that prophecy that is on the Great Seal. Henry Wallace, the 33rd Vice President of the United States, wrote extensively how he, Roosevelt, who was responsible for putting the Great Seal on the U.S. dollar bill, they believed that this was a prophecy about the coming of the God of Freemasonry, and on his arrival, the United States would rise up and become the global leader of the New World Order. They believed in those prophecies, and I bet the average American doesn't know they're carrying in their wallet and they're carrying in their purse. More often than they have the Bible on their person, they're carrying a prophecy about the coming of who we would call the Antichrist, because, as you know, Apollo, which is prophesied to come on the Great Seal, is the same spirit identified in the New Testament as the spirit that will fill the Antichrist, the man of sin.
Wow. Friends, if you're like me.
Wow. Friends, that was a lot to take in. Am I right? So essentially, this is what I've said in the past. I've done other shows on this. We've discussed this before. It's one of those things that you can't really prove, though. I mean, like, yes, he's saying these rituals happen, or this ritual happens because a senator told him on his radio show. But he went to the house temple. Tom Horn went to the house temple and asked the tour guide. And I imagine the tour guide's going to keep his mouth shut on stuff like this. So how do you truly verify that this ritual is really happening at every inauguration of U.S. presidents, right? So, that is one thing that I'll keep in the back of my mind, where I'm going sounds crazy, sounds very interesting, very concerning, but you can't prove it, right? So we gotta kind of keep that discernment going there. But he was talking about the seal on the United States dollar bill, right? And if you look at the U.S. dollar bill, the back of it, you'll see "In God We Trust," and you'll just see a bunch of stuff that looks like Egyptian mythology. It looks like we're kind of, into some sort of Egyptian Latin writing, Annuit Coeptus Novus Ordo Seclorum, right? New Order of the Ages, the Great Seal, right? In God We Trust. Now, what God is that? Am I right? Because our founding fathers here in America, I don't know if Christianity was one of the things that they wanted to. I mean, obviously, freedom of religion. They didn't want to have rule. Or they didn't want to have the church rule, right? And you can imagine, just like the leadership at any of these power structures, the leadership of the church at the time, probably pretty corrupt. You could say the same thing about the Vatican, right? Like the original CIA, probably the Vatican. Hello, you're going in and you're exposing all of your secrets in the confessional. You're telling all of these religious leaders your sins and the things that you got going on and your secrets. That's a lot of power. what do you do with that power? Assuming, I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying the church is all corrupt and all that stuff, but we all know that there's some corrupt stuff going on at the Vatican. All right, people. I mean, for God's sakes, they brought in an original obelisk dedicated to Osiris, and they got it hanging out there. Like, what are we doing? Right? So in this second clip here, let me go back to Telegram. Well, here, I guess I'll pull up this too. You guys got to see this. I'll hide me. So this is a coin, soul. This is kind of like a sun god worship coin. I don't know where this is from, but you got the 6x6 magic square on the back. You got the 111 at the top with the sun symbol. And down here is 666. And this is actually an omega sign, believe it or not. Right? It's kind of circled out by this red circle. But that's the concern is, people see this 666 and, the Bible's saying that's the mark of the beast, so what's going on? Are they trying to bring about the beast with this magic square, the 6x6 magic square that when you add up all of the rows, that's 666. If you add up all of the columns, that's 666. I mean, it's kind of concerning, right? Here is another clip of Tom Horn discussing Kabbalah and how each magic square, you kind of have a planet aligned to each magic square. So like Jupiter has its own magic square, like 4x4 or something. And then the sun has its own magic square, 6x6, right? And then what they did with this Bible, they kind of buried it to restrict or restrain its influence.
Magical.
Okay, so check this out.
In the magical Hebrew Kabbalah, each planet is associated with a number, intelligence, or spirit. The intelligence of the sun is Nakel, which equals 111, while the spirit of the sun is Soroth and equals 666. It makes sense, therefore, that Freemasons built the Washington Monument obelisk to form a magic square at its base, the exact values of the binding square of the sun god Apollo Osiris installed in the ceiling above where the Osiris ceremony is conducted, in the house of the temple. 111 is also the number of the Trinity, both dark and light. Now, when you compare the raising ceremony that's held at the Herodome beneath a magic 666 square to the Washington obelisk, there's some interesting facts. In fact, the same Bible that Dan Brown called the lost symbol is a Bible that was placed in a magic binding square inside the testes of the Washington obelisk of Osiris, the Washington Monument, the purpose of which is to restrain the Bible's influence, just as it is in the Herodome, while allowing the seed of Osiris to materialize.
Right. So, I mean, they're doing some weird stuff. Now, is that verifiable again? I don't know. Like, I've never heard anybody talk about this. I don't know if there's any proof that there is a Bible buried in a magic square underneath the Washington Monument. That might be for part 2, okay? And everybody watching this, they can leave me a comment. They can go do some more research and then say, yes, in fact, there is. So we can do that. Going back to the dollar bill and the prophecy, like the Sibylline prophecy, where did all of this stuff come from? When we look at the back of our dollar bill, why did we choose what we chose to put on here? In God we trust, Anuit, Coeptus, Novus Ordo Seclorum. The pyramid with the eye above it, right? The pyramid represents Osiris. There's actually 72 bricks in the pyramid, 13 layers, I believe, representing the 13 original colonies. And then the eye of Horus, right above it, right? So why did we choose all of this? Where does that come from? So in this video, this is Tom Horn again talking about his book Zeitgeist 2025. And he was writing about this stuff well before all of this is happening. And he's talking about, he's coming at it from the angle that Donald Trump is, interfering with this plan. He's not part of it. He's saying, before Donald Trump and now afterwards, because this was when Joe Biden was president. He's saying like there's this secret manifest destiny. Those are terms that Donald Trump has even thrown out there about like space race, manifest destiny. And he's, talking about the fulfillment of this golden age. Now you'll hear Tom Horn talk about this and try to equate it with what Trump has been saying lately. Okay. And like really map it out and, take that whole ritual that Tom Horn just described, like the raising of Osiris. Now, granted, we can't prove that happens, but if it does, I mean, it sure does make sense why there's an obelisk, why there's a dome, why it matches the obelisk dome pairing around the world in Egypt, in the Vatican. Like what else is there to define and basically describe why they're doing all this stuff? Like that's the closest explanation that I've heard. So let's listen to this video, and I might pause it here and there just to kind of discuss some talking points. All right.
In my book, Zenith 2016, which among other things noted that the year of Donald Trump's presidential election had been foreseen by prophets and sages for thousands of years as the apex date, when governments would begin shifting toward the spirit that is predicted on the Great Seal of the United States, the Antichrist, followed by the actual man of sin's arrival and acceptance on the global stage in the year 2025, which people will discover in the new book Zeitgeist 2025. But this was to illustrate the point in my book Zenith 2016 that one definitely would not determine that the God in America's official motto refers to the Father of Jesus or a biblical Trinity.
Okay, so he just said in the year 2025 that the Antichrist is going to come about. Okay? And who was elected in 2024 going into 2025, right? Inaugurated in 2025. Said this has been prophesied or prophesied or whatever for years. Very strange.
I wrote in that book, quote, "Imagine yourself as a space traveler who visits Earth in a fictional post-apocalyptic world. Digging through the rubble of the once thriving planet, you come across a copy of a U.S. $1 bill with the two-sided Great Seal of the United States joined in the middle by the phrase, 'In God We Trust.' Upon consideration, you ask yourself, what God did this refer to? And with no preconceptions, you allow the symbolism on the seal to speak for itself, from which you quickly determine that this had been a great culture who worshipped Egyptian and Greek deities, especially a particular solar one whose all-seeing eye glares from atop an unfinished Egyptian pyramid. Upon further investigation into the specific beliefs of the strange group whose members had influenced the Great Seal, you discover from their highest masters, including one illustrious Albert Pike, that the sun god they venerated so highly had been known to them at various times in history by the names Apollo, Osiris, and Nimrod, end quote. Now, I made that argument in Zenith 2016 because, unknown to most Americans, and certainly to the average Christian, the Great Seal's mottos and symbolism relate to both Osiris and Apollo specifically, and yet as one. Osiris is the dominant theme of the Egyptian symbols, his resurrection and return, while the mottos of the seal point directly to Apollo, and the eagle, a pagan emblem of Jupiter, to Apollo's father.
Okay. So there's a lot going on here. Apollo's father is the eagle, Jupiter, right? Now you're going to hear him kind of break this down where he's essentially going to say that God in the dollar bill, in God we trust, is Jupiter. That's where I'm getting this. Okay. So like, check this out. He's going to break this down, where this comes from, the Iliad and all that stuff, right?
For instance, the motto Annuet Coeptus, this is from Virgil's Aeneid, in which Ascanius, the son of Annius from conquered Troy, prays to Apollo's father, Jupiter or Zeus. Charles Thompson, the designer of the Great Seal's final version, condensed line 625 of Book 9 of Virgil's Aeneid, which reads, Jupiter omnipotus, audacibus annuet coeptus, which means all-powerful Jupiter favors the daring undertaking. He condensed that down to annuet coeptus. He approves our undertaking.
So it went from Jupiter, approves our takings and all that stuff, to he approves our undertakings. So Jupiter is the he, right? Am I right?
While the phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum, a new order of the ages, was adapted in 1782 from inspiration that Thompson found in a prophetic line in Virgil's Eclogue 4, which reads Magnus ab integro seclorum nascitur ordo, from Virgil's Eclogue 4, line 5, the interpretation of the original Latin being, and the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. Now that phrase is from the Cumae Sibyl, a pagan prophetess of Apollo, identified in the Bible as a demonic deceiver, and it involves the future birth of a divine son spawned from a new breed of men sent down from heaven when he receives the life of gods and sees heroes with gods commingling.
Okay, so a new order of the ages came from a Sibylline prophecy, okay? And this was someone who was tied to Apollo, belonged to Apollo. It was like one of the sages of Apollo. Okay? That's what's written on the back of our dollar bill here. Okay.
According to this prophecy, this is Apollo, the son of Jupiter, or Zeus, who returns to Earth through mystical life given to him from the gods when the deity Saturn, or Jupiter, returns to reign over the cosmos in a new pagan golden age.
Whoa.
What the alignment of Jupiter and Saturn on December 21, 2020 forecast, which many, by the way, including pastors, were erroneously referring to as the Christmas star.
Okay, so right here, he's saying December 7th, he's showing an article from NPR or some, news agency. December 7th, 2020, Jupiter and Saturn will form rare Christmas star on the winter solstice. And he was saying that the Christmas star is actually the Jupiter and Saturn conjunction because they're right next to each other, so it makes this gigantic bright spot. Okay? So here we go.
According to the Greek texts, the Magi followed an asteroid,
MAGA?
not a stationary star alignment, whose trajectory led them to Bethlehem. But it was the closest that these two planets have appeared together in approximately 800 years not long ago, and it did indeed forecast the arrival of a messianic son, the false one, whose spirit will reside in the beast of Revelation 17:8. From the beginning of the prophecy, referenced on the Great Seal of the United States, here's what we read. Now the last age by Cumae Sibyl sung has come and gone, and the majestic roll of circling centuries begins anew. Justice returns old Saturn's reign, with a new breed of men sent down from heaven. Only do thou at the boy's birth, in whom the iron shall cease, the golden race arise. Befriend him, chaste Lucina, 'tis thine own Apollo reigns. He shall receive the life of gods and see heroes with gods commingling, and himself be seen of them, and with his Father's worth reign over the world. Assume thy greatness, for the time draws nigh, dear child of gods, great progeny of Jove or Jupiter Zeus. See how it totters, the world's orbed might, earth and wide ocean, and the vault profound, all see enraptured of the coming time. End quote.
Okay.
According to Virgil and the Cumae Sibyl, whose prophecy formed the Novus Ordo Seclorum on the Great Seal of the United States, the New World Order begins during a time of chaos, when the earth and the oceans are tottering, a time like today.
A time like Joe Biden, right? Chaos was reigning. ISIS was out there looking for Osiris. She needs to build an obelisk. We need to have this inauguration to bring back Osiris, right? So, I mean, if you look at the Trump story and you align that with Osiris, Osiris dies, torn apart to pieces by his brother Set. You can look at it as Joe Biden. And then brought back together and rises as a unity of Horus and Osiris, that pyramid with the eye. That is the unity of Osiris and Horus coming back. So the resurrection of Donald Trump, I mean, remember all of these stories, all of these news articles equating Donald Trump to Jesus? I mean, Horus is seen as a Jesus Christ figure. Okay? Or you could say it the other way around. Jesus is seen as a Horus figure, depending on which way you go. So it's one of those things where we're in this kind of time zone based on all of these prophecies, based off of all of these Freemasonic kind of traditions, rituals. We're waiting for something to happen here. And this is what they're looking for. Chaos is reigning. Now what?
This is when the Son of Promise will suddenly arrive on earth.
Whoa.
Apollo incarnate, a pagan savior, born of a new breed of men sent down from heaven when heroes and gods are blended together. This sounds eerily similar to what the Watchers did during the creation of Genesis 6 giants, doesn't it? And why many believe that Antichrist also represents the return of the Nephilim. But to understand why such a fanciful prophecy about Apollo, son of Jupiter, returning to Earth should be important to you, in ancient literature, Jupiter was the Roman replacement of Yahweh. As the greatest of the gods, he was a counter Yahweh. His son Apollo is a replacement of Jesus, a counter Jesus. And this Apollo comes to rule the final New World Order when justice returns old Saturn's reign.
He's talking about the return of justice. Donald Trump, right? Promising vengeance against his political enemies, right? Remember that story when he was campaigning? Everybody's saying, oh, everybody, you know, Donald Trump is just going to take out vengeance on his political, like political enemies. His foes, I should say. So it's one of those things where all this stuff is kind of aligning. You're saying, okay, the return of Apollo, the false Jesus Christ. And now it's like, what? Everybody's comparing Trump to Jesus. What? Okay.
Now this ancient goddess Justice, who returns Saturn's reign, Saturnia Regna, the pagan golden age, was known to the Egyptians as Mat and to the Greeks as Demas, while to the Romans she was Lustitia. Now statues and reliefs of her adorn thousands of government buildings and courts around the world, but especially in Washington, D.C., where she stands as familiar Lady Justice, blindfolded and holding scales and a sword. She represents, according to the prophecy, the enforcement of secular law and is, according to this Sibyl's conjure, the authority that's going to require global compliance to the zenith of Satan's dominion, concurrent with the coming of Apollo.
Global compliance. when the coming of Apollo happens, what are we doing? We're going to bring in all of this surveillance technology with Palantir. We're going to bring some global order. I mean, don't know. There's a lot of AI going on right now. There's a lot of all of this surveillance technology with Palantir, AI, the future of just the surveillance state. That to me is screaming, hey, we're going to have a new digital dollar and that you got to take a mark to buy or sell. Because if you don't have this new technology, you won't have money. Right? It's all just kind of fitting in to the same timeline here.
What's more, the Bible's accuracy concerning this subject is alarming, including the idea that pagan justice will require surrender to a satanic system in a final world order under the rule of Jupiter's son.
Apollo.
In the New Testament, the identity of the god Apollo, coded in the Great Seal of the United States as the Masonic Messiah who's going to return to rule the earth, is the same spirit, verified by the same name that will inhabit the political leader of the end times New World Order.
Boy.
For instance, according to key Bible prophecies, the Antichrist will be the progeny or the incarnation of the ancient spirit of Apollo. 2 Thessalonians 2:3 says, "Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition." And this is the Greek word apoleia, Apollo. Revelation 17:8 likewise ties the coming of Antichrist with Apollo, revealing that the beast shall ascend from the bottomless pit and enter into him. It says, "The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition," apoleia, Apollo. "And they that dwell on earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is." End quote. Among other things, this means that the Great Seal of the United States is a prophecy, hidden in plain sight by the Founding Fathers for more than 200 years, foretelling the return of a terrifying demonic god that seizes control of earth in the new order of the ages. This supernatural entity was known and feared in ancient times by different names: Apollo, Osiris, and even farther back as Nimrod, whom Masons consider to be the father of their institution.
Very dramatic, everybody. Very dramatic.
In the last chapter of the book Zeitgeist 2025, we circle back to that prophecy to expose the most insidious aspect of the scheme that is now counting down to the year 2025.
Oh, boy.
The information that...
Okay. So then he goes on just to kind of like promote his book, but very interesting, right? He was talking about this stuff in 2023, 2021. And he's talking about other stuff like the Wormwood Comet prophecy, all this stuff. Now, very dramatic, okay? Very kind of fear porn type of stuff, you know? So I'm just saying, like, I don't know if any of this stuff is real. Like, you can't really verify any of it, but damn, there's a lot of alignment. There's a lot of coincidences that add up here. Am I right? Am I right? So, yeah, I'm just like, I was looking through a lot of different things. This one really caught my eye. The dollar bill. Why do we have Novus Ordo Seclorum? And what did what did Elon Musk tweet right after Donald Trump won the election? Novus Ordo Seclorum, right? He had it on his jacket at the Met Gala or some sort of event, you know? And so it's like one of those things where you just look at the alignment with these big tech giants, transhumanism, Peter Thiel, You got Palantir. You got this mRNA type of technology that he wants to do to cure cancer, right? Project Stargate. It's like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? And so this guy's been calling it out for years and just saying like, hey, that's just a prophecy that they all believe in. It's on the back of the dollar bill. So when that prophecy comes to be fulfilled, what happens to the dollar bill? Like, you just got to get rid of it, right? Because prophecy's already done. Time to create a new one. But those, the books of the Sibylline prophecy, like the way that occurred and the back in the, like the Roman days and like, just like the way that people in leadership went to these prophets to kind of identify. It's like the movie 300. I don't know if anybody has seen that, but like, it's literally, they go to these oracles to try to tell them, what should we do? Right. And surprisingly, there was a group in charge of keeping like the oracles and all of the texts, the sacred texts, protected. And it started with a Q. And I was like, is this like a sign, like a hint to the Q group? Like, hey, we're keeping track of this. We got all the knowledge. You'll be surprised who you're talking to. I think there was a post talking about that. So maybe that's in for part 2 on this stuff. But check this video. I mean, I'm just going to throw out some other stuff here. This guy kind of talks about the origin of a magic square, like the story where it actually came from. This is a lecture. Oh, who is this? This is Ed Brumnack. He did a presentation, and man, he talks slow. This is about 2009, so I mean, many years ago. But he goes through like the cipher and how the Freemasons use this as a cipher to decode things. And it's really interesting. Here, let me play this. So he talks about like the divine turtle and how you have a magic square on the back of the divine turtle here, okay?
Story goes that thousands of years ago, by the Loshu River, they had some sort of a problem, and they didn't know exactly how many things to sacrifice in order for something to happen. And then the answer came on the back of this turtle from the river. And you can see the back of the turtle has 1 dot, has 2 dots, has 3 dots, has 4 dots, 5 dots, etc. Okay? If you look at the way this thing is arranged, you see it's arranged this way. Okay? So that's a 3x3 magic square, or the divine turtle. This is probably the most famous one. And you see...
Okay. And then he goes into how we used numerical. So, like, where did we come up with our numbers?
Now, I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but how do you think we got our symbols, our numerical symbols? If you have these many items, what do we write? 1. Well, the original ancient way of writing 1 was this. If you have these many items, what do you write? 2. If you have these many items, what do you write? The original way they wrote it was like this, 3. And if you observe what's going on, they're counting the number of interior angles. Look at this. Here's 1 interior angle.
So he screws up on the number 2, but...
Here's 2 interior angles. Here's 1, 2, 3 interior angles. That's why... How many things we got there? 7. The original way of writing a 7 was like this, and in parts of the world it still is. Why?
And he screws up just a little bit again.
Yes.
So he has to add
5,
in the one down
6,
at the bottom.
7.
But you'll see the interior angles is where we get our numbers. So angles and interior angles at that is how we created these symbols. Like, that's why we have the number 1 the way it is, the number 2, 3, 4. It just like blew my mind. I was like, what? He goes on to talk about the number 0.
And guess what? No interior angle, 0.
0.
So whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that's one way of explaining our symbols to denote a certain number of items. Okay?
Right. So he's just going off and all this stuff. But going back to the cipher, he's talking about the pig pen cipher, okay? And I'll get that queued up right here. All right, so check this out.
1300s and the 1400s, there was a society called the Masons that wanted to communicate among themselves without other people understanding what they wrote. So what they did was this. You see, they made an X, and they made, well, let me put it the other way. They made an X, and they made a structure that looks like this. Now, looking from above, this may look like some sort of a farm, and usually pig pens look like this. So that's why this is also called the pig pen cipher. And the idea of a cipher is to use a symbol to denote a concept. So what they did here is they wrote the alphabet like this: A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z.
There we go. Okay.
I'm showing off. And if you want to refer to the first letter in that position,
So
you just write it. For example, you see this would be an A.
So you're using the symbol
This
to make the letter.
would be an I. You see. But if you want to refer to the second number in the letter, in that position, you draw the symbol. For example, if you want X, it's in here, but it's the second letter. So you put a dot in there. Okay, so this is X. All right? So let's write something. I don't know, let's write something simple. Let's write pig. So pig would be the second letter in here.
Yes, I am.
The first
Right.
letter here.
So you're putting all the symbols.
And the first letter here. So that's pig.
Right. So just the way, oh God, another ad. All right. We don't have to watch any more of that, but that's where I got so deep into this research. I'm like, what is the magic square? What is all this stuff used for? Magic squares can be turned into ciphers to write secret messages. And they were using, various forms of the way that this cipher goes. So instead of going like A, B, C, D, like you could start at like X, Y, Z, A, B, and then just rearrange it. So that way each letter is a different kind of symbol. So you have to kind of know what cipher you're dealing with, and someone has to know the key of how to read it, right? So it's like one of those things where magic squares aren't just magic and like used as talismans to like bring about some sort of change, like a meme. It's more of just a way to communicate. And that's another thing too. It's like, how are you communicating? Who are you communicating with? Who all can read it, right? So it's like, are you trying to connect to another realm? I don't think so. I think it's more just like, how do we keep stuff secret and hidden by creating some sort of cipher that no one will be able to decipher, right? So it's one of those things that I found interesting. And I was thinking about the Q clock. Now, if all of you remember back in the day, the good old Q stuff, right? Someone came up with this. The Q clock, where it starts on a day and it starts in and then it spirals and it goes around, goes on the outside, and then each day kind of aligns to a certain post and you write it and all this gobbledygook, right? It's kind of hard to understand. I think I have a video on how it works here. So check this out. This guy tries to explain it. We'll see if the volume's good here. All right.
This is going to be a video on how to read the clock. I'm going to try to keep this short and sweet as possible, okay? Let's do it. You can see that we have a series of dots around the clock, and we begin at the top of the clock at the 00 minute mark with the date of 12:07. That happened to be 2017. These dots revolve around the clock and continue to spiral outward and outward and outward and start to overlap one another. This, in essence, forms a calendar on the clock for us to follow. For any given day, you have to find the date on the clock and look at that ray on the clock in order to determine which Q posts relate to that day.
Right. So that's, I mean, pretty much what they're doing here, right? They draw a line, and then you kind of see where it lines up and maps to, right? So think mirror, think all these different like dates, could be posts and all this stuff. But I was thinking that is a cipher. It's called the Archimedean spiral. Archimedean spiral, I think. And so the Archimedean spiral, also known as Archimedes spiral, the arithmetic spiral, is a spiral named after the 3rd century BC Greek mathematician Archimedes. And is sometimes used to refer to a more general class of spirals, but this blah, 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 blah. So you have a fixed point and then just kind of spirals around the original fixed point, right? So it kind of looks like cipher. This is a spiral cipher. And so I'm like, is the Q stuff a Freemasonic type of cipher? I don't know. You tell me. You know, is it related to some sort of magic square type of thing? I don't know. But this stuff, it really got my interest. And I don't know. You guys tell me what you think in the comments, because I heard Tom Horn talking about this thing above this ritual room, above like where they do the rituals in the house temple, the headquarters of Freemasonry. And it blew my mind, and I started going down this rabbit hole. And my oh my, it's seemingly like, what is it? Is it a ritual? Do they use this to bring about Apollo, to raise Osiris, Apollo, Nimrod, whatever you want to call it? Does this ritual even happen? Is there proof? If there is not proof, we can kind of just look at the coincidences, right? The 2025 predictions that this is kind of the end times, dude. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I don't even know if I buy into any of this stuff. But my oh my, like when you dig in and you kind of go from one coincidence to the other coincidence, and you're going, okay, Trump, what's going on here? It's kind of hard to deny that something else is going on. So you guys keep your eyes and ears open. Everybody stay safe. If you like the episode, hit the like button. Leave a comment. Let me know what you guys think. And if I missed anything, if you want to throw anything out there, let me know. All right? So until next time, stay steamy.